Hello there, welcome to the K32.in's video sessions. K32.in is proudly presenting the educational video sessions for students. In this video session, I am going to explain you the very easiest way to install the Fedora Linux on top of the Windows. The basic requirements for setting up the Fedora Linux on top of Windows is that you need to have at least 40 GB of free hard disk space in your system, and then at least 2 GB of the RAM. Then you need Windows 7 OS and a software called as vmWare player, and you need an downloaded ISO file of a Fedora Linux OS. You might have heard about the Linux installation, that it is very difficult to install the Linux, as you need to create a separate hard disk partition for that Linux operating system. And let's understand what virtual machines are and how vmWare will help us to install Linux on top of Windows. So this is your computer hardware on top of which you are running the host operating system, that is Windows 7, on top of which you might have already installed the vmWare player. So what we need to do in the next step is that we need to install Linux operating system inside the vmWare player application. So vmWare player acts as an intermediary between the Linux operating system and the computer hardware. It shares the computer resources both with the Windows operating system as well as the Linux operating system, that is the guest operating system here. So as I said, if you have 2 GB of RAM, then 1 GB of RAM will be dedicated to the Windows 7 and another 1 GB of the RAM will be dedicated to the Linux operating system. In this way, all of the computer resources are shared between these two operating systems. So virtual machine vmWare player will take care of sharing the resources to the Linux operating system. So this looks like that. You will be running the Linux operating system inside the Windows itself simultaneously, as if you are running any other software application inside the Windows. So let us try to install the Fedora Linux. So I am going to assume that you have already installed the vmWare player software. So let's open that vmWare player. In this one, you need to create a new virtual machine for your Fedora Linux. Here you need to select the ISO file. If you have a Linux DVD, you have to choose this option, or if you have the soft copy of the ISO file, then you need to select this option and choose and browse to the ISO file path. This is my ISO file for the Fedora, and I am going to set this up. So this is of type Fedora, and then let us name it as Fedora 19. So this is the path where my virtual machine files will be saved at. So this is for internal purpose for the vmWare player. You need not to bother about this one. Just keep it to the default settings. And here you need to configure how much of your hard disk space has to be dedicated to your Linux operating system. Let us give it to the 40 GB. And then in this step, we can configure the RAM capacity as well. Here you can see that 1 GB of our RAM is going to be allocated for your Linux operating system. So I have 4 GB of RAM in my current computer system, and hence I'll just allocate 1 GB of the 1 GB of RAM to the Linux. That is enough for us. That's all the configuration that we have. Let's finish. Now it has created a new virtual machine in the vmWare player. So now we need to boot this Fedora Linux so that installation setup will be started. So in this one, choose this option, Start Fedora Live. Once you put the cursor inside this vmWare player, you may not be able to get the cursor back by moving the mouse. For that, you need to press the Ctrl and Alt button so that you get the cursor back. So you can see that the VMware player is trying to install Fedora Linux in a separate window. So you can minimize that window and work back with your Windows as you are doing with any other application software. So you can also come back to Fedora Linux by opening this one. Well, in this option you need to install it to the hard drive. In this wizard based installation, you need to select the default settings, the language to be English, continue, then select the time zone, then you need to select the hard disk where the Linux has to be installed. So just click on this one. This is already showing the 40 GB of the virtual hard disk that VMware has already created as a virtual partition. Just choose this option and click on done. Come back to that disk selection. It will now prompt this dialog box. Just click on continue. It is now creating the partitioning inside that virtual hard drive. So the initial directory structure of the Linux has been created as in this step. It is now ready to begin the installation of Linux. Well, the installation is started up. Meanwhile it goes on, we can go and set the root password and create the user accounts. So it is up to you about how strongly you want to give the password as. It gives the first time as a warning about the weak password. Then click on the done once again. Well, now let's create the user account. I will create one default account called as Ashok and give some password for him. Again it's complaining about the weak password. Just ignore and click on done. Well, these two steps are done. Now let us wait for the Fedora Linux to complete its installation. It might take around 10 to 15 minutes to do this process. Once the installation is completed, you will be taken to the login screen. Then your desktop will be ready. You are now ready to work on with the Linux operating system. Well, once you are done working with the Linux, you can shut the Linux machine down by choosing these options. You can shut down or suspend the current state. So once you choose the suspend state, you can restore the session back immediately. So this will result in a faster loading of the Linux operating system. So let us suspend and try to relaunch it once again. So VMware will save the current state of that machine, so that once you come back to the Linux again, it just restores the previous state. So loading of the operating system will be faster at this time. Well, D once again. So uninstallation of this Linux operating system is very easier. Once you don't want the Linux anymore, you can always go back to the VMware player and delete the virtual machine. So that you can do by shutting this down firstly. And choose the operating system that you want to remove and right click delete from disk. This will remove the Linux operating system entirely from your virtual machine. Thanks for watching this video. Please feel free to share this video with your friends.